All right, guys, we're gonna watch episode 1 of A Week Away, the series. And as the creator and the director, I'm gonna talk along, give a little commentary, a little behind the scenes, whatever comes to mind. I'm so grateful and I'm so proud of all of the creatives that came together to make this show. And so I'm gonna do my best to give you a little peek behind the curtain of all the things that happened to make it what it is. Here we go. The angel logo, you gotta have that. This episode has been approved by the guild. Yes, it has. That's a fun process. It's a cool process, but it adds an extra layer for creatives that is, it's cool, also a bit challenging, but that's a different video. Monarch Media, proud to be a part of that company with my partners Steve Barnett and Vicky Patel. Here we go. This kid was great. It's a lot. Both these kids were great. It's a lot to ask of young kids to, be in this environment, be in this set, and yeah, do this. Fun fact: that shot of Ed Armatrudo at the door, these two shots rather, are the only shots that we actually kept from the torch. So these two shots from Ed Armatrudo were shot 2 years ago when we were making the torch. And there is our hero, Mr. Antonio Cipriano. He's reading my favorite book of all time, The Alchemist. I gave that book to him as his wrap gift. I should ask him if he's read it yet or not. Also, when Jake says, "I can see you," that makes me laugh every time.
That was cute. Did you guys rehearse that?
I allowed the score to be a little bit louder in this moment than it sort of should be, because to me, I'm trying to subconsciously have the audience see this whole world through Max's eyes, which is why we start on him as a little kid, and we smash cut to close up of his eyes, and then when he opens the door and Lenny and Jake are talking to him, he's not really listening to them. It all sounds like a bunch of noise to him. So that cue is a little bit louder than it should be, because in my mind it's just kind of a bunch of noise in Max's mind as well. So my hope is that with little things like that, it will invite the audience to see this story through Max's eyes. Shout out Haven Green, did a great job playing Ro for us. That was her intro scene. There's Luke. Such a cool kid, man. I met Luke. He was an actor at my daughter's local theater company here in Nashville, and I've seen him do 3 or 4 parts, and he's just amazing every time. And he read for the part and nailed it, and I'm so glad that he was able to be with this part of the show. Dude, Jake makes me laugh, man. Well, you don't want to go to camp? Why don't you want to go to camp? So we're coming into the first musical number. We're making a musical TV series, and it's super important. How you get into music in general is always something to really think about and be very strategic about. But obviously, the first time, I was really focused on it, and I wanted it to surprise you. And that's why Jake's all of a sudden singing. And also why, again, this is another, you go to Max and he's like, wait, what's going on? Because we're seeing this through Max, and he's confused that Jake is singing. The audience is going to feel that way a little bit. But if the audience, through the lead character, knows that Max is a little confused about what's going on, then hopefully they feel comfortable about what's going on, and that it's all ridiculous and it's overwhelming. They feel that way, so does Max, so it connects them. And I think gives you, a comfort as an audience to know that the filmmakers know what you're feeling, and that you're going to be in good hands and can go on the ride. At least that's the hope. But at the same time, you're making a musical, man. You can't apologize for it. So we get Max into it pretty quick. I still love this. It's My favorite section of choreography in the whole series. So let's see what Max has. Man, Antonio just came to play in every section, but obviously it's very important. The first time you hear him open his mouth to sing, that it feel right, that it feel, in this particular context, like aggressive, and that you really work with Paul and Ryan from a choreography standpoint to make sure that it's feeling very organic to him, and the opposite of what we just experienced. So like Jake's choreography is very kind of like broad and optimistic, and hopefully by contrast, Max's choreography here is a little bit more understated, a little bit more aggressive, and you start to kind of show how different they are. The twins, dude. Man, we had all sorts of problems on this day trying to get these shots inside the house. We had lightning stuff going on outside. We had about, I don't know, 70 crew members that were just stuffed inside this relatively small house trying to get those shots. I was really grateful for everybody being patient with me, frankly, and the circumstances to get that done. So we're outside now, and what I think is cool about this visually, this is part of the previs that Ryan and Paul always come to the table with previs. Most of this is stuff that they kind of designed and sent me, and we'll have filmed on an iPhone, and then we go film it more fancy. And it's pretty close to the final edit usually ends up being pretty close to their original previs because they're really great storytellers. Of course, you cover it a bunch of different ways, and then see what you want to do in the final. But it often ends up pretty close because they obviously know what they're doing. But I do love this moment outside on the field where the choreography is not the same until about halfway through the chorus. At the beginning, it's very like sharks versus jets, and the choreography speaks to each other, but it's not the same. This is gonna suck. This is gonna suck. I love that part because it really sets your main character. Like he's going, there's nothing he can do about it. But I'm a fan of like being very clear for the audience of like the starting place for your main character. So that opening monologue when he's saying, "Why don't I want to go?" We get a sense of, it's very intentional. We get a sense of where he's starting, call it theologically or philosophically, or like how he feels about faith, really specifically, and this camp that he's going to. And then, in case it wasn't clear enough, the last thing you hear is just the simplest, "This is gonna suck." And for those of you who are fans of the movie, that's in exact opposition to what George says to Will on the bus. He goes, "This is gonna be great." It's not a mistake. We just thought that was a funny little Easter egg. David Koechner, can't thank him enough for coming back and playing David again for us in the show, reprising that character that he played in the film, and introducing Lee Allen Baker as Carla. These two, man, pros, absolute pros. Been doing this for a long time. You've seen both of them in a whole bunch of stuff. But some of the most fun days for me was just watching them do this, especially when they're in a scene together. You just kind of point a camera at them, and yes, we had lines, and they're pros, so they always knew them. And we may do we'll do a pass or two of the lines, and then why bring these incredible artists who are so good at thinking on their feet and not allowing them to play and push? And so a lot of the stuff that both of these characters said, and certainly the way they played it, I am not funny enough to write or imagine, at the very least, the way that they would play it. So I'm almost as much of an audience member watching these two work as somebody who didn't write the stuff, because they're either playing it so differently than I would have been able to imagine it, or they're coming up with new stuff that we certainly didn't write. And either way, we're grateful for them doing it. God is up to something. He's up to something good. He's up to something amazing. A little Easter egg for those of you that are a fan of the film. He said that line in the movie. I like little ways to tie the worlds together.
This is my assistant, Bog.
G for G. Isn't that the coolest name you ever heard? I don't know why I always thought that line was so funny. B for Bog, O for Og, G for G. Isn't that the coolest name you ever heard? I'm pretty sure we came up with that line in this room one time when we were doing a writing session. I was just walking around, and that's one of those things. I don't remember who wrote it, whether it was me, Cozy, or Kaylee Bailey, but I do remember laughing very hard when it was said for the first time, and laughing even harder when I saw Jason Marsden do it for the first time, because he is very, very funny. Also, we totally thought that the character of Bog was going to be this quintessential sort of like huge, 6'5" bodybuilder type. He was named Kronk for a long time because I love that character in Emperor's New Groove, and we kind of wrote him after that. But we obviously can't call him Kronk, but he was supposed to be that sort of big burly character, and then Jason Marsden read for it and just knocked our socks off. And as often, or sometimes I should say, can be the case if you have a great actor, they can change how you see a character, and he totally did. I am so excited that he played Bog for us, because it's so much better than anything I could have ever imagined. Shout out to our friends at YMCA for their willingness to allow us to use their camp and help us fill up these environments. There's Ava Jean playing Savannah. She just absolutely kills this role in my mind. I saw Ava Jean for the first time a few years ago at a theater camp. She was great then, and then she continued to work on her craft, and she read for Savannah and just nailed it, and then showed up and somehow did even better. We knew she was going to be great, but she just is fantastic in this role. Also, we shot this scene later on in the schedule, oddly enough, even though it's the beginning, but we had already done a bunch of it. And somehow Savannah, just because of the way I was like shooting it and kind of like mapping the scenes, she ended up coming out of nowhere in like a lot of scenes, and we just thought that was really funny, and so we kept doing that. And so by the time we had done that a few times and we were introducing the character, of course we have to introduce it in a way where she just like comes out of nowhere and overhears what they're saying. I love that introduction of her character.
What ideas do you have?
We just saw a moment, like the first sort of, if you watch the whole series, you kind of know the Savannah arc and her relationship with her mom. And we wanted to seed that throughout the entire series. And so right now, we just saw the first interaction between Carla and Savannah. And if you pay close attention, and Savannah does a great job, and so does Lee Allen Baker, you'll see her kind of dismiss her daughter as Savannah goes to say hey to her mom. She's like, oh, hey, and she pays attention to Lenny. We're seeding that sort of relationship so that in episode 7, when it really kind of pays off and we see what's going on, that if you look back, you've kind of seen those things along the way. If you watch it again, you'll definitely see them. But hopefully, even on first viewing, you're either noticing them or like feeling them subconsciously. And Ava and Lee just did a great job. This scene like literally hurts to watch for me. Make you proud.
I'm proud. Make me proud. Vessel.
Be the vessel, be the vessel, be the vessel. So Ava and Lee, I think the instruction, like I think the page said something like, Savannah and Carla do a handshake, something that simple, and then I'll never forget they were so excited to show me this thing that they had come up with, and I was just rolling when they showed me be the vessel, be the vessel, be the vessel. If God is for us, who can be against? Like all of them, so funny, and I love that we were able to kind of make it a runner in the show. So much so that it actually becomes an impetus for, showing the change in Savannah by the end of the episode when she just can't bring herself to do it for the last time in episode 7. I get a lot of questions about why Charlie doesn't want to sleep on the bottom bunk. And I guess all I'll say is that that's a real, I stole that with permission from a friend of mine who grew up in the foster care system. And I remember talking to them about, this story and like making sure it felt correctly represented, and they were willing to share with me just some of the ramifications, if you will, of going through the system the way that they did. And they said, I know it sounds weird, but I can't sleep on the bottom bunk. of bunk beds because some stuff that had happened to them, and I asked if we could put that in the show and not really explain it, but just to give it a feeling of authenticity, and they obliged, and so that's why it's there. Jake's bandana, Jake's theme song, this bandana thing. Like, this is when you see the switch in Jake, right? He was the guy who was really nice and like, oh man, it's gonna be great, and enthusiastic. But when he gets to camp, he's an over-the-top guy. And so when you see that switch, and we're saying that this is who Jake is at camp, it has to be over the top. And certainly Sasha checked that box in this scene. But again, as we try to keep the audience connected to Max, it's okay that you feel, I'll say, cringy in this scene. You're supposed to. So does Max. That's what we're doing. It's supposed to feel almost like Max thinking back on it as a memory in a way. But like, we're seeing it the way that he sees it. And it's over the top and it's ridiculous. And yeah, there's just little things along the way you can do to try to tie your audience to your POV character. Try what? I love that edit. Try what? The tribunal, as if David was answering the question in real time. That's a good example, though. Like, we actually filmed David Koechner in his office saying that announcement. All right, campers, it's time for the tribunal. And we had edits of the show where we went to David's office. But same thing, I wanted the audience to be Max, and Max wasn't in the office. Like, he didn't see that. He just heard it. So instead of going to David, and it was a great performance, and it was funny, we just hear it the way that Max hears it. Because especially in the first episode, I really want to tie you to Max so that you go on the journey with him. And it's not a mistake that we start, the episode in a Max flashback, and then essentially we're going to end in one here in a minute. And if it's a TV show and we have a lot of characters, so we do expand beyond just Max's POV. But in the first episode, I really wanted to cement whose story we're telling, and that's Max's story. And it's little things like that I tried at least to do so the audience felt that way. It can't be. Well, just real quick, that's my daughter. That's my oldest daughter, AJ, who's named after one of our other kids. If you watch the docuseries, you'll know that that's actually my wife and I lost that baby on the first day of production, and her name was Hazel May. And AJ came to me the day we found out that we lost her and asked me if we could change her character's name from what used to be Brienne to Hazel May. So that's a special thing for me. First of all, that she's in the show, but also that she's named after our baby. I have to take a second and talk about how funny David Koechner is in this scene, dressed up as Moses, to be very clear. Also, that moment where he wants to be very clear that he's Moses and not a wizard or warlock of any kind was 100% for my mom. Shout out, Mom. That was for you. We had a bunch more Harry Potter jokes in here, but we just felt like we beat it to death, so we just did the one and moved on. Hopefully you can tell that, like, Max and Lenny have shared some moments, and they're looking at each other and stuff, but ultimately Max requested to be on Crimson Angels because he wants to stay close to his brother, because he's protective of his brother. And we've already met Savannah, and can already tell that Max, thinks that she's somebody to look out for. And when Savannah's talking to Charlie, Max needs to make sure that he stays close to that. So ultimately needed to be on that team. Mr. Carlos Penavega, so grateful that he was willing to come out and play this role for us. I just think he plays it beautifully. A little behind the scenes fun fact: in The Torch, he played the foster dad and his wife Alexa played the foster mom, we were going to have those characters come to the camp, and it was going to be a whole thing. And then, as often happens when we went to go make the series, we had to make some creative adjustments, and we had to get rid of those characters. But we have this, this camp pastor role that we needed. It was originally played by Lecrae in The Torch, and he couldn't do it, scheduling reasons and all sorts of stuff. And so there became this need. He called Carlos, and he was willing to come do the thing. And man, I just can't imagine it any other way. No. I also love this misunderstanding scene. I like writing misunderstanding scenes where one character is assuming something and the other character is assuming, or they're assuming something, and so then you get to play against that. Like the fact that Max didn't put together that, yes, you were right, there's a camp pastor, and it's the guy you're talking to. I love this look from Antonio right here after he... Of course, he says. Really good. He's good, man. It's hard to be funny, vulnerable, believable when you're being serious. And then you add the singing and dancing on top of that, and it's a really special thing what all of these actors did in this show. But Antonio as the lead has done a really, really special job. So Cozy Zulsdorf, I've been aware of for a long time. Amazing human, incredibly talented. When we did this scene pretty close to exactly the way it's written right now. When we did the Torch, the proof of concept for Angel a couple years ago. Of different characters now because we had to change casting for schedule and all sorts of reasons. But one thing that hasn't changed is obviously Cozy playing Lenny. And when we shot this Torch a couple of years ago, I knew that I needed a monologue, like a moment from Lenny here to kind of like let us into her world a little bit and just a little bit of vulnerability. So I had written something much more surface level. And Cozy, because she's a great creative and really wants to do a great job, she said, "Man, can we get something more from Lenny here? Kind of let the audience into her world." And some version of I was like, "Yeah, I'm certainly open to that. Like, what do you think?" And she started kind of telling me what she was thinking. And I knew that she was a writer because I'd read some stuff that she'd done before that. And I said, yeah, cool. Take a shot at her, something like that. And then I was busy doing other stuff and directing, the Torch. And she sent me the monologue that she thought would be cool for Lenny to say. And I loved it, but I forgot to tell her that. And so we were shooting the next night or something, and I came up and I remember she was like, "So what's she saying?" I was like, "Oh, just say the thing you wrote. It's great." So, a couple of years ago, she wrote this monologue, and then she performed it beautifully, and wrote it beautifully. I'm pretty sure exactly the same monologue you're seeing in the show right now. And she performed it just as beautifully, if not more so, when we went to do the show. But through that process of her writing that monologue and just talking story with her, it was very, very clear that she had so much to bring to the table other than just playing Lenny in front of the camera. And so Kaylee Bailey and I invited her to come be a part of the writing process for all of the episodes. She's a co-writer on all 7 episodes and does an unbelievable job. And truthfully, some of the most powerful moments in the show are a very direct result of her writing. So I'm so grateful that she was willing to do that.
First campfire, he sang Amazing Grace, and I heard God.
It's an interesting thing to watch. It's an interesting thing to watch Antonio go from this girl's cute, whatever, to almost scoffing when she starts to be vulnerable, but she says some things that are surprising to him. Growing up is pretty loud in my house growing up, and that's intriguing to Max. And then for her really to start to say some things that he resonates with, and for her to draw him in, and then here at the end, played beautifully by Cozy, and written by Cozy for that matter, I want to be there when that happens for somebody else, and then she, I don't know, it's just off the top of my head, throws the thing that he said at the top of the episode back to him, and they have a connection And it's almost like, this is a weird way to think of it, but this is a worthy adversary. They're not like adversarial, like it's not by any means like she's the antagonist or anything, but there's something about this girl that I didn't know was there, and also she's challenging me, and they're challenging each other, that we wanted to really seed early. And I think this monologue obviously is a huge part of it, and Cozy's performance of it is a huge part of it. I mean, Amazing Grace. Oof. This is my favorite song on the show. Antonio sang it unbelievably well, performs it beautifully. I got to take a moment to shout out my partner on the music, Adam Watts, who is the executive music director. I don't remember what the title is, but he's the guy in charge of the music, making sure that it's great. We had another song in this spot. I think it's okay for me to say, I'll just say it. Dare You to Move by Switchfoot was in this spot, and I was very excited about the take that I had on that song. It was Max singing Dare You to Move to God, which I thought was really, really cool. Welcome to the planet, welcome to existence, everybody's here, everybody waits for you, everybody's watching as he's looking around. And we couldn't get that deal done. They're great guys, everything was fine. But I was devastated by that, and because I have a great partner in Adam, he, you know, was kind of carrying the ball. I said, man, let's just, we'll write something great. And he started with Amazing Grace, and we wrote this song together. It's my favorite song in the show, and I can't imagine the series without it. So, you know, it's just one of those things. You think it's bad news, and you think, how are we going to recover from not getting this song that I kind of built the whole theme off of? It doesn't happen, and you have to pivot, and sometimes you end up with something that you're even more excited about. So I'm just grateful that happened. Look at this guy just out here singing his face off. Beautiful production design by Nate Griffin. Beautiful lights in the background. James King just shot this so well. This is important to me. I don't know if anybody knows or anybody cares, but he's walking in this circular wooded area that we put the lights up in this big circle. This big tree was in the middle of this circle. And it was important to me that Max land at the middle of the circle when he has landed at the center of the issue for him. And that is, what if it's not worth saving a wretch like me? That's the center of his struggle. What if I'm not worth it? And so it was very important to me that he land at that tree that's in the middle of that circle on that line. It was important to me that we went up as if we were God looking down, and he looks up as if it's a prayer, and we come down the tree. Again, I don't know if that's the kind of thing that anybody really notices, but my hope is that subconsciously those sort of little things add up to an emotional impact that's going to, you know, that the audience may experience. But I was really, like, I'm really proud of that sort of, I guess, metaphor. I mean, like, this is my favorite song in the show, and it takes so many different people coming together to make, you know, a show in general, and I'm just really, really grateful for everybody. I mean, look at that shot, dude. Antonio just crushing it. Nate's production design, James's camera, Adam's tune. It all comes together, and then I do the best I can to try to highlight everybody else's amazingness, and then hopefully the sum of that is something that impacts you and tells the story well. And then then we got the bloopers, which you don't need me to talk about, but that's episode 1. I hope maybe some of that was interesting. Watch episode 2. I'm going to do another commentary on episode 2, so check that out. And I'll see you on episode 2.
That was cute. Did you guys...
That'll do. Especially when it's raining. We'll pick it up.
Sorry, can I do that throw again?
Yeah, going again.
Sorry, man.
Pick me up, bro. Stop pulling me down. There you go. You gotta go up. Okay.
As your apostle. Wrong one. Go back, start coming in.
This is me. No.
That's not man. Yep, this is